Rāmbā sāṅgē chōngdēn dēbē yewā shākyā tūpa lā chāsā chōdō gyāsā jē. Kāni tsō jē tāṃsē sācīn jē lā gōmbā dōngkūrē. Jī dēn dē nā chō jē sōng tē sē jē wā kyō lā chāsā lā nāndā pō chō sā sō tāṃ wā yī jē yā sō sē jē lōmbō rā. Nāvā jē dē sō nā lā mē wā gōmbō chū jī jē lā chāsā. Sēn chō dēn bā jī mē dā wē shā sēn dō chā wā kyō lā chāsā lā. Dēnrā kyōlā sēpā sūmā jī nyāmē jīnjī kyōlā chāsā. Mōmbō tūjī jī dēmbā tāṃ jī kīnglē dēmbā. Sōnā yōndē kyāsā jī dē jī kyōlā chāsā. Nāvē dē chā dē wā kyō kēvē nyē sōn lē rō jī. Chidō dāngā chidō bā chidō kyālā chāsā. Tōne rōvē nā yāng dēn dāpā dāmā rā dēne. Sīngi dāmbā yēn dēn dēn kīndū lā yāng chāsā. Dē bā jī yāng mē chāsī yé wā pūsūṃ tō parā yé. Rāngē sēne yōng tō dēne sāngē dēmbā yé. Karma rare marvedam yuma seva chuburdam melam lohan tenda bunde chechunan de tardam sonan de tamje sibai goban dovne genge radde kada nada chive labjule sibe tole drova through the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, the supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that dharma which pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits, may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by waves of aging, sickness, and death.
Ubongo de la yara ji toba nambara tau, ene sanje ji tu zedan demba sheribu, anju semba semba jembo baba jere ze wanju la dege je meso, reje bo kala la shera je paru do cheba samo cheba cheba deba, shedara la bara cha, dege je me bada, anju semba semba Aba jire ze onju ki sedan denpa shari dade bola tege je meso shari pu reje pu mo ala la shara je paru do cheba samo cheba cheba deba dedara nambara tawa chade kumbo ngabo deda laya ra chen je tomba nambara yanda ba je su tao su tomba ni su su le tomba ni jem Tongpa nile jiang su xin ma yin nu, te xin du cuo dong du xie dang du jie. Xie pa na tongpa wu xie ri bu, te tar chu tang zhe tongpa ni de zhe nye me pa ma jie. Ma ga pa te ma me pa te ma dang te wa me pa ka wa me pa wu. Xie ri bu te ka wa na tongpa ni la su me, su wa me, du xie me, du jie. Number Sheba me, mi me, nawa me, na me, chi me, lu me, yi me, su me, da me, ti me, ro me, reja me, chu me do, mi je ka me ba ne, yi je ka me, yi je number Shebe ka je ba do ya me do. Mare ba me, mare ba se ba me, ka je se be ba do ya me do, te je do do me wa. Kunju wada goba name rishi me koba me mato baya me do. Sheri gu deda wana jaju semba na toba me bechir. Shiraje barado chimba la tenji ne de semba triba me. Traba me de chinji lo le shindu dene nyame le debe tar chindu. Tuzondo namba chube sanje tanje ya shiraje barudo chimbala tene lana yanda ba zobe chanju do ngombara doba sanje so teta wana shiraje barudo chimbe Reba chimbe nga lana mebe nga minya bada nyebe nga dunge tamje radu shivara chebe nga Meje bana dembara sheba chade shiraje paru do chembe ma me ba taya gade bara sang gade buddhi so shere bu chanju semba chimbo deda shiraje paru do chemba samo la labara Tene jonde de tengi de tele shende chanju semba Awa jere ze wanju la leso, she chawa chene leso, riji gu, te de jino, te de chetara juje tenpa shindu, sherab je paru du chenpa, samola chebara chade de shin sheba. Jesu yira mo chomden de je de je ka chene, chetan tenpa shere dade, Anju semba jembo baba jere se wanju dan tamje dan dembe korra de tada medan lama yedan tezar jebe jede yer sonde deje sumba la ngomba de pong.
At that time, it was about totally absorbed in contemplation that began to all the now we have to fall around motivation. And at the same time, the local office began to come, the really got around myself out of the huge profound practice of the analyze to define our beliefs for language. Then through the information of the program, then the relation to the drugs in the world we get about the way that our stuff how do know the family members should be part of the practice and the wisdom on the job. The so and the know we sketch from really Saka and I Saka, replied to the emotion saying, or should we be the son and daughter of the family follow the practice of the wisdom on the job. Should we like this and I think the 5 countries Always say happiness is form, happiness is other than form is other than emptiness. In the way of building recognition, information, so much to go and do. Therefore, all phenomena and people are characteristics. They are important and seizing. They are neither impure nor free from impurity. They neither increase nor increase. Therefore, happiness is no form, no building, no recognition, no information. The functions the head, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. There are tears, the eyes, suffering, tears, no mind. There are none of these, all the way to the spirit of consciousness. There is no their destruction. There are none of these, all the way up to the end of the page of that. No their destruction, all the way to that. No state of suffering, no cause of suffering, no state of suffering, there is no other thing than therefore, shame will drop because there's no pain. All of us are holding the on beyond. And because of it loves you in your mind, I go here. Rationally, don't want to see if you know around to solve. All of the business well with the mind, the mind of the on beyond. Moving through the living front of the small perfect and believe in right. Therefore, my God is on behalf of the big inside, and he will interact on you. But the council of salvation is the truth, for there is no exception. My God is on ground. I have but I got it. All the guidance powerful, then it was like a boat that the police out now and stuff that's exactly like that. Put out the stuff on we don't shoot back that today. And then but the last one that
Otus da no 자제 사이마가 나주 모두 진짜 차이데 사탄은 주 모두 진짜 이게 다 나무지 지나 최승에디 지나면서 최세디 유바 최 시자가 안 거기 시자가 세가 이제 최근한다는 뭐 시에요 티난 최스 다 티난은 최제세 다 가서 수수 기부 수수 그냥 렌즈 아니 돈 다 최제단这些 어디 쉬고요 내 손.
Thank you. And now is our regular Sunday introduction to Dharma lecture, as it is an introduction to Dharma. Generally speaking, mention of Dharma suggests all the objects of knowledge and information and presentations of all of this diversity. But then when practicing Dharma is suggested, this means the adoption and implementation of a Dharma.
아무것도 세상 이제 이게 다 맞아 최제세는 강사지기 자화지 제백이 딱 한다 자화지 제고고 최제세다 자화 제세가 맞아 다 지난 용다로 제배는 직대다 최스 직대 다든 최제세를 네바 제세를 직대 제세를 다 한다 지기도 주노도 표저 단단히 제세 단단히 개발되지 세상 다디 이제 최제세를 다 가리 그걸 되고치 저어디 제발을 때는 제부 되어치 용해기 자 지기도는 다 취지 마스 아니 저어디 제발 때는 제부 되어만 좀 제부 동에 요거도는 아니 지게 제마스 지금 다 제시 자단데 제시해서
To speak of then Dharma practiced, this means there is an individual whose activities they undertake with a general recognition that there are ordinary activities and dharmic activities. And just as one may be constructively active or destructively active, one may engage in dharma or worldly activities, and there are a variety of presentations of the range. Here, dharma is the activities which have as their consequence well-being. And then one may say, here, dharma is done. And when the consequence of actions is pain and suffering, these are ordinary activities. And here is an ordinary presentation of dharma.
Boy, 지난번에 최세를 보 최고랑이 나 로그 유도 지난 전에 로그 세제 유인 배차는 로 유도 자동 왔어. 저도 세자서 명직다 세자. 아니 세맥의 유도 여바인자 여바스. 세막에 나로 세마다다 무슨 더 저는 왜로 세맥 유도 여바인자 셰디스 여바스. 아니 세맥이 또야 정말 또야 추이다 시자스 시자 추 그 시에버서 시자스 아니 그 추이 간다고 여바한테 되게 추이는 걸로 추에서 민지다 그래 아니 유르스 유 로기 거기 배주다서 그 치유 유이다 유스 롤 민대는 추이다 민미다 뭐 여러서
Furthermore, dharma is phenomena, objects that are objects of knowledge, that is, objects which appear to a cognizer are also described as dharma or phenomena, as well as existent in the sense of observable, directly observable by a cognition, a cognizer, and existent, so an existent, as well as an object of knowledge, as well as that which is validly known, validly cognized, and an object of a valid cognition. These two are phenomena, these two are dharma, and they are processed by cognitions.
쌤 유진 쌤기 자화제단당 쌤을 유셔주 거네 아니 미미라 다다지 거래서
Here we have the standpoint which is objective regarding objects, and the standpoint that is subjective regarding cognizers of objects.
뭐 갖고 최대 판 디나 판 대전 치기나 뒤지기 최 디마지기 최 니리를 해서
Here too, there are categories of compounded phenomena and uncompounded phenomena.
뭐 다디네 수 디마지기 최대는 리미라만 뭐여 뒤지 최대는 리미라만 뭐여 다 단단해서 조시하고 뒤지기 최대나 시험 주사마 뒤지 최대나 난기 최대 치 최 뭐도 되게 되시디 그래서
Within the category of uncompounded phenomena, there are diverse contents. Regarding compounded phenomena too, diverse contents. Here our emphasis is particularly on compounded phenomena, two of these kinds, internal and external.
다 난기 최대 치 최 세디 말하는 수술을 자료이나 수술을 자료이나 말하는 거 치기 온복이 유도 샤야 수가 다다 티더 로다 리젤도 강alo 치취했어. 바티 거기 치기 최대기 나 거기 론스 얘기 나기 셰바기 심벌 추 강이 받아라 나기 취했어. 어떻게 되시냐 그래서
Where there are then internal phenomena and external phenomena, internal dharmas and external dharmas, we might first take sight of our body and recognize in the body the sense faculties which process forms and sounds and scents and flavors and textures are these, the forms, sounds, scents, flavors, textures, etc. Those are external phenomena, external dharmas. Regarding the internal dharmas, those cognizers which process these are internal dharmas, internal phenomena.
다 이인데 먼저 막 세장도다 치 취스리 다 온보고 시야를 치 치료가 유디겠지 다 치료가 유디겠지 난 치료가 유디게 되는 바탕이 시해봤지 난게 셈시 다 취스리 밖에 다 시주 셈的 저와 매조 치 유디는 거 취취스 다 셈的 모습 저와 유조 다 변하는 류나는 미기 온보 나의 온보 제 온보 만족의 셈 그러면 저와 제사기 유기 온보들이 남기 취득을 해서
Within such an explanation, then external phenomena are the phenomena which appear to sense faculties, and then there are internal processes processing external data, and these are cognitions. And these are thereby external phenomena and internal phenomena. And the external phenomena are objectively disconnected and separate from cognizers. And then cognizers that are internal, such as vision, olfaction, gustation, and the rest, are processing such data.
다 되지 다 제일 때마다 가르쳐 왔으나 다 남셈들이 치 추르고 내로 되게 돼 되게 되다 내수 고군 바람이 춘이도 가리임에디 다 시험을 제야 된다라 아니 다음부터 취해 내세 좀 받게 돼 신기 요구요 해서
Internal cognitions that are intended for identifying the actual nature of phenomena are the cognitions that are linked to the practice of dharma.
보이다 이제 이랬으면 담아서 쭉 내룩 시험 봤어야 된다 쭉 되게 내룩 시험 받을 당은 하도 수 잘하이나 답변은 수술로 라모 수 간다르다 취재로 두부로 좀에 나와이나 마스터를 예스 직스를 예 풍보다 센스 풍보스들 풍보로 미네 아니 다 풍보 미수 내가 시야 아니 풍보들 때문에 셈 내가 시야 오다 된다 다 되게 뭐시야 된다다 아니 다 치고 내서 버티기 담아 버티기 사다 연구를 했어
The nature of phenomena, when phenomena are the basis and their nature would be understood and adopted as the subject in the case, such as this, for instance, of identifying oneself, I, myself, and the basis for that notion, twofold, the physical aggregates of the body and the mental aggregates. When one undertakes to know the nature of the physical aggregates, and based upon the physical aggregates, the mental aggregates and the mind, then we come to the steps in the practice of dharma.
뭐이 어디 가르치면서나 간다 루이다 셈기 내수다 고랑게 내수다 내다 아니 바게다 거기 내나시 마신 바이나 아니 디 로디 마신 바이 디 로디 트루네 아니 트루베 왕게 아니 고 니모키 한 거를 니모키 사회는 니모티 레사를 레사 사회는 레디 또 동해리 용요 제가 다 맞을러 메디르 동해 가가로 다 간다 치고 니루 마신데 왕게 아니 다 니모키를 또 트루바키를 이 왕 레사를 레사 아니 동해 용거로 제가 다 제부 동에도 세고 요라 제부 동에도 세버 제발라 당고 규디 뭐트 규디 바까 아니 신의 제부 동에 세버 마다 신 탑요 말해서
Why are these the steps of Dharma? They are for the reason that the mind and the body and the nature of mind and body, the abiding nature of these phenomena are, without the steps of Dharma, unknown. In being unknown, this ignorance gives rise to confusion regarding their nature. The confusion causes afflictions of the mind. Afflicted minds engage in negative karmas. Negative karmas' consequence are pains and sorrows. Pain and sorrow is undesirable. Therefore, one would understand the nature of phenomena. For when one has not understood the nature of phenomena, one is confused regarding phenomena. The confusion begets afflictions. Afflicted minds engage in destructive karmas. Destructive karmas yield pain and sorrow, and we intend to alleviate pain and sorrow. Therefore, we must eliminate the underlying cause of that pain and sorrow, and there is no other method for alleviating it.
뭐이 스타트 제부 디나신 다스 네루 다스 랑기다 루이다 생기 추기 니루 차단 셴바이나 아니 가르치스 네루 셴발라 때네 로 투바디 계기 말 로 마추 로 차마 계기로 로 차마 계발라 때네 아니 랑기다 레 개와드 사기 레 개와드 레사 랑기로 제부 대와드 통고돼서
The nature of mind and the nature of body, the nature of phenomena, when they are understood, when that understanding is valid and no longer confused, the valid understanding gives rise to, instead, virtuous karmas. Virtuous karmas have as their consequence contented well-being.
뭐지 대단한데 이게 나가서 일 가지고 왔으나 다 죄냐네지 다 하나 가지고 마시는데 다 된대게 셈기 내루듯이 루드 셈기 내수이 되게 자산 셈바 용어 제발 다 대라 나로 당기 길러 텨봐 근데 스텝에 되는 삼에 되는 그런 당기 길러 아니 죄는 내루도 싫어 마게나 아니 나중에 길러다 뭐 살려고 내다 아니 니모 요 다디나시 단다 사심바 다디 얘기 내가 니모디 이게 다 봐디 수치 두고 그랬으나 다 죄는 니르시에 셔럽죠 셔럽도 장이 줄에 깨서나 아니 되게 장이다 동의게 유칼리지 있나야 거기 매가 소고가 동의게 어디 셔럽도 소고기 왜 이래 다 셔럽도 깨베 치들라 아니 맞다 죄냐네 지다니 그래서 무슨 지기 열해서
What follows then? It follows that the practice of dharma would be the very practice for realizing the nature of mind and body as they are. To that end, in order to understand phenomena as phenomena is in its nature, one studies and contemplates and cultivates. They contemplate what they've learned and they integrate what they've contemplated so that a realization of the nature of phenomena may arise. Until it has arisen, accumulated karmas remain, as well as afflicted minds, those that have already accumulated and those that are ongoing and accumulating karmas and klesha, that which eliminates, purifies of these karmas and kleshas is the wisdom realizing the nature of phenomena. When this arises in the mind, when the wisdom which realizes the nature of phenomena arises in the mind, the karma and klesha are treated. Therefore, one engages in their study and contemplations and cultivations to this end.
세상다 제대로 다 당고 그런 림버도 제바이나스 당고 퇴바시네 삼바세 되는 고마스 거다 콘도 기제를 맞차비 그래서 아니 이내가 로콤바 신산이 되죠 퇴선 고소 림버도 제고 말 야, 퇴선 고소 지제도 좀도 있나요? 야, 퇴바다 삼바님도 이 고마다 삼바님도 코티 우수수도 로콤마 제발 봐도 이지미지야 고통 못 해봐지 한인의 돈 삼바지 돈바지 된지 뒤를 한번 그렇게 예봐야 말해서
When stages in a practice are divided in a progressive way, they may be in this way, into study which precedes contemplation, and the contemplation which will precede the cultivation, as there is a causal relationship between each and the next. However, for an individual who has grown entirely familiar with the process of cultivation, then those preceding steps of contemplation and that which comes before it, study, are not necessary, for one is able to engage in all simultaneously in any event of study. One is contemplating and cultivating, and in contemplation, one is learning and cultivating. But for the individual who hasn't gained any familiarity yet, this sequence, this progression is outlined. However, for the individual with familiarity, it isn't absolutely definitive that the study must precede the contemplation and so on.
뭐야 다 이제 저는 무슨 책을 나로 최텔이야 아니 그 림버도 무슨 림버민도 망보체 이나네 림버 당보들이야 아니 지 가다 남도 섬도 때 가다 러베 림버 당보들이야 아니 라니 아 배나마도 세디기 에두 따순나 치도라 아니 이 저선 무슨 제 요래 아니 치마 토리다 타다 미 고반 토비하기 치도로 저선 고순 제 요래 치마 탈바 토비 치도로 저선 고순 치고야 요래 아니 라한다 신 탐지기도 고반로 꼬베 치도야 저선 고순 제 그래서 뭐 먹고 요래였습니다.
All that is involved in study and contemplation and cultivation, and there is much involved, diversity and variety. At the outset of the path and training in these steps along the path, when one looks at this present life and satisfaction in and dissatisfaction experienced in this life, there is study and contemplation and cultivations with the objective of addressing pleasure and displeasures experienced in this life. And there is to study, contemplation, and cultivation with the objective of addressing births in heavenly realms as devas do. And there is study, contemplation, and cultivation with the objective of liberation. And there is to study, contemplation, and cultivation with the objective of establishing oneself and all others in the state of Buddhahood. In this way, then, the variety in the stages in practice.
That's a dig suzuki. 강에 마요야, 동에 마요야. 아니 세디기 랑다 대답 좀 제바 있는 아니 다마도 최 제베 그 최바 말해서.
Now, this life, in view of its hardships, with the wish to eliminate hardship and pain and sorrow, and experience satisfaction for oneself, such an objective is not dharma.
가르치면서는 뭐가 하장 충 잘했어. 또 취치고 된다고 창의 말을 그거 충분히 해서
And the reason it is, not dharma, is the purpose is far too limited in scope.
나한테는 세대기 된다라는 게 최식이 진에 핑계 말하다 제거야 이거 말해 세디 가리 임바 있네 거다 사차비 내주지가 차대요 그래서
Whatever the outcomes in this life, there's no real treating them, addressing them as they are all predetermined outcomes.
나 최식이 마음바지 삼는 단계요 마음바지 삼는다 마음바지 삼는다 마음바라가 내주이 삼보용이야 두고 마요야 미디샤 아니 대지를 다 간대치고래 간대치는 야가 요래스 어디에 삼는다는 최직이 해서
When the objective and consideration is the future and the good that may come in the future and a situation free of pain for the future, and this is the objective, and one considers what one would do and what would be best to do, this is then set up for dharma.
사디 인지 당만도 마오바세디 세디기 류드 남셰디 카가체니 남셰디야 류사바치 렌지 류사바드 렌두사마타 나조 다들 렌두 상으로 프로투와 지금 해와지가 요래서지
In the future, at the moment when the body and the mind part ways and the mind then is re-embodied, then in that new re-embodiment that occur in such a way that prospects for the individual are improved, this is dharma.
세상다 디인도 만족에 디네판 돈 랩사치다 로사치 이어바치 디리 트시시야 딜 랑이 아니 퇴선 고좀체 딜 랑이 네바시니 때네 아니 치마치 이어바치 랑이 켈레 말 때네 다 치마 약보 세리다 약보 치마 약보 고고 이어바다 엠페 니 약보 소고 이어바 디치도로 당아서 아니 주님의 제세 제시디 자기 요래서
Therefore, there is a transmigrating and a place of arrival, the outcome of that transmigration. And one may study and contemplate and engage in cultivations in such a way that they gain the conviction in this, such that the succession is accepted. And then when successive existences are acknowledged, then one will recognize, I would have good prospects, and I must make for good outcomes and prospects. And when this is the objective, this is to practice dharma.
근데 이두들마다 치마 당기 치마지 여바 켈렌 사유세 켈렌 당기 예바니 아니 켈렌 사디 다 치마들라 아니 치마들 다 간데스가 해스 아디니 파트와 땅네 다 치마유나 치마디 치마이나 치마 맛 고여버디 두그래 이 여바이나 다 치마들라 나나니 대화 간데스 토그래 동해 간데스 세워레스 다 지워디 지도라니 맞다 르바냐네 마모디게 되는 많이 다 셰고 녀고래 소노시
When successive existences are accepted and the conviction in them has been gained, then one considers what sorts of existences are to be expected. Since there is a succession here, what can I anticipate next? And after that, next. And after that again, next. And I would recognize I myself achieve contentment and eliminate pains and sorrows but to do so, I must learn and study, and I must listen as I study.
어떠시 세상에 이제 좀 다나도 치마 대화 듣고 여봐 이나네 대화 두야기 냉게 쓸려 수도 두그래 수도 그래 했습니다. 도바들에 세상 다티 두두에 두고니 단다 하나도 밀려 단다 예배랑 루딘 디테는 유저 나스게 니 두고래 말 대화 거래 땅에 대화 토베스도 말하는 탑시 책이 있어 어디 사무디 땅하니 다 내가 지금 그랬습니다.
Well-being and goodness is what an individual would attempt to achieve. How is it achieved? Who is it that does this? It is the individual possessed of the human biological endowment, each of us, I ourselves, who will accomplish this. And I, each of us, will commit myself to achieving contentment and work towards this.
나도 이제 치마 대화 두고래 대화 토베 요래서다 대화 딜라 아니 대화 딜라 친구 가다 대화 초랍 링 개발 요래서
Of the contentment and satisfaction that may be achieved, this achievement, there is such an achievement. The achievement too is of a range from the best of to an average kind of achievement to the least achievement.
나 대화 초 두고 있는 라나 신 당말이야 아니 도민 세트야 대화를 네트야 아니 탐지 개별 고방스 민다 그래 이 대화 초 지금 해서
Best form of well-being is the alleviation of pain and sorrow from all sentient beings, oneself and all others alike, and the establishing of all sentient beings, all others and oneself alike in the state of omniscient Buddhahood. This is the very best form of contentment.
따뜻한 대화 등지 두고 있었나 나랑 동해도 탐지들 재원 아니 대화 토바 탈바 고알 탈바 토바 치도라 아니 다 대화 두에 들어서 탈베 대화 두지 치도라다 냠미지 그래서
The lesser form of contentment is to personally achieve liberation, alleviating one's own personal pains and sorrows, and achieving for oneself well-being. It is liberation from samsara, and the satisfaction that ensues is a lesser form of well-being.
나디는 타마도 지내봐 이마이나야 치마 예선도 맞게봐 사다 미 고마야 요번에 톱투야 여봐 사다 미기 대화 톱투야 여봐 어디래지 토바지 나 죽나 아니 대화 토바세 나 내부여 레슨지
And the least form of well-being found is the prevention of rebirth in hell realms, the securing of heavenly and humanly rebirth again. And when this occurs, this is the least form of well-being. It meets the minimal limit for being considered a form of well-being.
뭐야 이치들가 이거 년내체 최치 있다 최고야 괜찮디 차바라 해서
In view of these outcomes, activities undertaken are the dharma meant when one is urged to practice dharma.
뭐야 되게 년내니까 시행 감각이 지투구를 왜 수치 지투구 말해 어따 디네 지투니 수를 지마투니 수를 해서 다 봐봐
Such an undertaking, is it an undertaking that all have a capacity for? Who is capable of it? Who is not capable of it? These questions ensue.
that big the leg the chair to Bala, that carry chorus not that much. And that that they were true, but the doing this seven check in Yamne, the switch to the said that the land in Allah, that carry chorus not that much of what other Lam Rim Ma sharing. Enjoy to engineer said that language, language, but to Dange, and Yamne, she much go your resolution.
For such an undertaking, for the capacity for such an undertaking, what is required? What is required for alleviating pain and sorrow and achieving contented well-being? Who is capable of it? And what is it that they do capable of this? And in the framework of the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, it is the individual with the leisures and endowments and the great significance of the human embodiment who does.
세상 뒤인데 좀 되게 최 당고 숨도 정말 최 숨인데 엠바시기 남샤도 최 냠내기 좀 배기 온도 채는 엠바시기 남샤도 나 엠바시 숨은 엠바시기 구름 숨도 하고 정보디 동행 엠바스 동행 엠바스 동행 엠바디 뭐트나 동행 엠바디 뭐 쳐야 되돌아 아니 당보디 미다 미다거든 당고송, 최 당고송도 야 미다고송. 하면 양년에 대가는 몰라야 미다고 공부해야 돼. 그래. 맞으나 말하도 미큐마도 이베는다. 미 통과하면 모두 가짐 샷으로 모두 메시지하는 가짐 샷 리처도 준비되는 거라. 싶고. 다만 양년에 대가는 몰라야 아니 최 미다고 대청고지 송 어디를 해서
The Buddha Shakyamuni, first proclaiming Dharma, began with presentation of four truths of the Noble Ones, the four truths of the Noble Ones given in their order, beginning first with the truth of the Noble Ones, that is, pain and suffering, and for the identification of this truth, the Buddha first observed impermanence. At the outset of the Buddha's proclaiming Dharma, the Buddha Shakyamuni began with impermanence, and then at the end of the Buddha Shakyamuni's life, there too, in the last will and testament of the Buddha Shakyamuni, again, the Buddha emphasized impermanence.
that the Yudamata the Kari Yamne the Kari Sungoresana. That Kanta Chu Yams most of Nag, Yams Nag did that, taking out the Chunam Nilu Share, Tombani, Toya Tang, Tombani, Toya, Tap, Sanju Simni Budi. News Yamletter Chu Dinero in a Yams, Taro Chebala, Yams Tar Tuya, Chajing Chidula, Mitapa, Chiwa Mitapa, Temba the Mena, and in Tawochu, Toman Yams Langamari. Yams Lamba Yina Yam, Chidin, around Jules Yams Lambadi, Langula, again, Chid, Tawajula Kewa, Villa Rumar. And then you do some of that, Tamu, Mitapa, Temba, never Hechimo. 차디 메타바디 템바이나 아니 같이 두고서 메타바 템바텔라 때네 아니 최념 소방바디 하고 간다 꾸마 땅에도 마스나 아니 그 메타바 템바디게 적을 해서
What does this show? The first emphasis on impermanence. When Dharma entails the realization of the nature of phenomena emptiness and the realization of emptiness, when this requires the development of the method for the realization of the nature of phenomena, namely exercising the two forms of the mind of awakening bodhicitta, which are principal, where first impermanence is emphasized, this indicates that impermanence is the beginning, and one won't go forward into their progress without a recollection of impermanence. For any realization to arise in one's mind, it will not arise without first moving into the Dharma through the recollection impermanence.
Oh, yes, that the that's your metaphor. Temper, and in other that there were chewing you yobata. Chiwa Mateva, Midapa, the Mateva, the chewing Yogi maybe that Nizuti Tone, and it Amazo Tamu chewing Yams line, Tamu goes to Sadodi, Chiwa Metapa, and go to Kuya lessons.
Therefore, contemplating imminent death and fleetingness, impermanence, one engages in dharma, neglecting to recollect death that is impending, and impermanence, one does not practice their dharma. And as this is the case, here the very opening and beginning point of dharma is the reflection of impending death and fleetingness.
Oh, yes, the Chiwa Metapa, the end, and the subject of analog, the center of each. And what said the Lang said the Temple member, the Yuan, Namji, but the Julie, Jungum Medeba, and that Chiwa never under Chiwa, Jesu Chambers, Namji, but the Chiyu, but the Chamber Chicks. That Chitsawe Jella, and it comes to Karchigre, that they do, Joy, Yomare, they were countries to make countries or the native by Nina, and Midabo to Shigre.
The contemplation of imminent death and impermanence itself involves two parts. The first, the recognition of the unpredictability of the present life, that it changes inevitably and constantly and necessarily in death. Contemplating this, one recalls imminent death and fleetingness. And then the second part, that once one has died, is there any state of pleasure and displeasure, satisfaction and dissatisfaction to come? And should there be one to come, what is it that one must do in view of their imminent death?
Oh, yeah, that thing would be Chiandu, and it would Chiwa Martena, and never career, young careers, but the chickship. Chiwa Trebaina, and it paying career, person careers, and Chiwa contest temporary is in some chain, and she your lessons.
In practice of contemplation of imminent death and fleetingness, the contemplation has again three parts in its practice. The first, the contemplation of disadvantages to failing to bear in mind imminent death and fleetingness, and the contemplation of the advantages of bearing in mind one's imminent death and fleetingness, and then contemplation of how the contemplations themselves are undertaken, these three parts.
오, 다 제가 같이 한국도 치워 맞잖아. 교양 가리어래 이미 가리어 세죠. 제가 가리어래서는 다 치워 맞잖아. 최 지금만 최 제 다른 탑시 라사 최 생통만. 다 치워 맞잖아. 아니 가르쳐 세디 코란 나는 상로마도 세치마게 비두를 상로 땅 두고 말해. 교양 한국도 대요. 그래서
That first part, the disadvantages to failing to contemplate impending death and fleetingness. What are those disadvantages? What are the perils of neglecting to recall impending death and fleetingness? The disadvantage and peril is that dharma itself will not occur to one. And insofar as it hasn't occurred to one, then one has lost their only means to treating. And when one does not practice dharma, then this leaves one preoccupied with the present life solely.
뭐야? 나 세디기 수수보다 또그 차와다 또 왔다. 되는 단 예배가 숨집 제마차세 하대로 되는 또도 그랑 또라나 그 말이 그라나 땀 말이 이제 그 하다 때 메시티기 동에 대화 친주지라는 그 코र्स 아니 이 최지 치마 편지를 대화 두백에 고급들 한글렌트 뭐 말해 때 말에 봐 있나 아 최지를 나 최제세 지기 타니구나 대요 말해서
That preoccupation with the present life is obsession with food and clothing and one's reputation, and these alone and these exclusively, in such a way, though, that one finds food but has a want for clothing, or has food and clothing yet hasn't the reputation they want, and round one remains obsessed with these and these alone, and at no point is dharma ever undertaken in such a way, in fact, that the notion, the term itself, dharma, is all but absent.
세상다 치워지 제수 쳔바지 중앙이나 다고 치워메다고 제수 쳔바지 중앙이나 아니 그 가르쳐서나 빼나마도 두바 rumbu chilo ba rumbu de ani ko dwa yim ten khesa ta ko dwa ya chidula ni korang thadi khari chigu yena dige de sadan korang chigir wada ko de me dwa yiba yindi ani dwa ya thadi de ma de ya thadi chig marwa o tina shi rumbu ani dwa re ma na shi ani samu de ji ko gire de ji samu ko go gi yore so
When one does recall impending death, when one does recall fleetingness, when one recalls these and contemplates them, one is like a guest in a guest house who is aware that they will travel again, and aware of this prepares for their travel. They know themselves to be but a sojourner, and so prepares along the way. It is to be, by virtue of recollection of imminent death and fleetingness, to be a sojourner who is prepared. It occurs to one that one moves on, and this must occur to one.
oh yeah 저는 뭐 언니 member 있나 왜냐기 사무도 콜 member 있나 아니 그 자리디 지금 말한 거들 니버들 그 대학이 차시 되게 와 어디 나신 안 하죠 메타버드 템버 있나 아니 주부 조나 신지 거다 거도 조나 간데 조고도 조사 가와도 간데스 조고도 갈도는 야가 되게 뭐 다리식으로 어디 나시 지원 메타버드 템버 있나 네 지원 메타버드 템베 배열할 때네 아니 가르치거스는 수수비 도야 자리지에서 그 마루 그게 조사기 차게 가르쳐고도 그게 가르치려고도 되게 그런 자리식으로 어디 나시 어느 고치만 대화 치마 대외 탑나 좀뭐 책을 해서
When it does not occur to one that they will be traveling again when one hasn't any thought whatsoever of one's progress. First, one makes no preparations whatsoever. And secondly, one entrenches in their idea of ever remaining. And these are the disadvantages of failing to recall one's own impending death and fleetingness. But when one does recall this, one has a notion of a route that would be taken, how best one might go forward along that route. This is by the force of the recollection of imminent death and impermanence, an advantage of these contemplations, that one then is inspired to prepare what is needed in view of where one would arrive. And by virtue of this, one engages actively in securing satisfying outcomes for when they do move on.
거의 다들 저보이자 그 수수의 대인 가들 보고 이거바디 수수 소화여러 보고요. 아니 수수 간다 밖에 만들어 있네 간다 나라 상황이 말 간다 고 남지마도 수수 미 강바이도 고 도용 보러 되나 신경 안 줘다. 미다고 그런 신경 내 사도 나라 대비 언제 비어말 그 니만 게 주주도 끼지 돈 고지 보이잖아. 로데어 그러마도 콜 라는 대비 언제대 여말 간다랑 되투야 차진 가요 맞아 꼭 가다 미다도 뭐 언제 뭐 지도 그래 시도 그래 일단 시사회 제일 아니 내가 가리메디 랑이 미다고 테마데 개발을 할래 계속
with the recollection of impending death and fleetingness, impending death and fleetingness become sensible. Sensible as opposed to the stubborn idea that one will remain. One recognizes that they are a tenant who is eventually evicted. Therefore, by virtue of understanding the nature of transience, impermanence, with the recognition that there is no remaining continuously, the desire to remain itself disappears. And instead, sensible and recognized is impending death and consistent transiency. Whether this is sensible or not depends upon whether or not one contemplates transiency itself.
뭐야 단 치워 맞추는 예미지 다 치워 양 tre는 치워 제버이나야 치워 tre는 가르쳐 버렸으나 자꾸 치워 반대 치워 tre에서도 치워 가고 강에 마요나 아니 니네 봐 치차네 아니 수수다 도사게 나가도 저 강가로 tre디 삼로 땅 거야 아니 거기 미기 좋아시 거야 망보여로 뒤수 야부지 용거로 와 되나신 치워입니다. 뭐 텐데 치고 백말 텐에서 템버들 때네 아니 다 이니바 템버만 보지요. 다 치워 템버를 때는 치 안에 치워 뭔들 내용도 잡아 아니 라기 배선하다 셈마투바 아니 라기 이니바 치마 도사가 라가되게 되다 딱딱 샤기 도투바 도야 가르 두고 있다 되게 두고로 와오 뒤두 보고 뒤 두바디 마주기다 다다 치워 되나야 두 모두보다 그와 자기 망고요. 그다음 알아도 망치워지 치워 제발 요나야 치워되기 그 유인내야 치워도 간다 자리 쳐야 되기 따라지 마상하시 위여와 오 제가 루장 치워 천장 미주의 이믹스 sabject 치워 템버 있나야?
예.
아니 그 라네 마다지 마두지 뭐
There then the disadvantages to neglecting the contemplation of imminent death and transience. And they're the advantages of recollecting imminent death and transiency. But to merely recall imminent death and impermanence is not a complete practice. For at the moment of death, in order for there to be no mental disquiet at that moment, and in order for the passage which follows after death to what comes next, in order for that passage to be ably passed through, then, in addition to the mere recollection of imminent death and impermanence, one must engage in activities of practice so that there is no mental disquiet at the moment of death, so that the direct passage following death is well traversed. This requires further activities. It isn't that mere contemplation of imminent death and impermanence is enough. Most of us might recall our imminent death and impermanence, but not engage in any of these additional necessary activities.
어이 말하죠. 치워 공화디 강가로 미 통구열 고구열 세는 저기열 치기를 해서 봐. 미 치워 통구열 아니 고구열 아니 랑게 거도 치서 나서 나 치기를 다 삼아. 말하죠. 이 또 제바디 용구열 이나양 치워디 제바디 용구열나양 그냥 드링식 말에 드링식 말에 산이식 말에 산이 맞으 딱 한다 달로식 말에 산이 맞으 그냥 단지 로식 미타고 챙기려냐 냠도 단지 레야 거다 드링식 말다 산이식 말 달로식 말다 산 단지 레레바디 가르치는 치워 챙겨 맞으면 이미 되게 제발 해서
And so this third part is, though recalling imminent death and transiency, nevertheless, there remaining the disadvantage of not actively practicing. That is, death is manifestly apparent to us. We hear of it and see it. It occurs to us that we will die. They have died, and I too must die. This occurs to us, for death is plenty apparent. Yet, though it occurs to us, nevertheless, we think to ourselves, though not likely today, nor tomorrow, nor even this year, though death occurs to us, and our own death, nevertheless, inveterate self-grasping along the way reassures us falsely that it won't be today, nor tomorrow, nor this year. And this is to recall death, yet still there is the peril that one is not actually practicing.
아니 단지기 로세 로디 미나 단지기 로 되게 다 맞다 치워 말로지 봐 마시 봐도 달로디 어좀 지금 말했으면은 아주 다 뒤쇼 친구들이 누구 알았어 제가 되게 로디 쳐서 손에 치워 생이 지금 말해서 미치를 로디 랑 단지기 셈네 아니 아주 다 최제도 뭐주 봐 최제 거기 그거 맞죠? 단지로 되게 해서.
Now this pernicious mind, this disabling mind, this inveterate self-grasping, that though death occurs to us, reassures us that no death is likely today nor tomorrow. This pernicious mind takes back the opportunity to practice dharma by repeating, no death for me today nor tomorrow. This self-grasping prevents our dharma. It takes back an opportunity that was ours.
뭐야, 세상 들이 이리 언제다 간다를 된제기 왕게다 간다 들이 간도 뭐 미치고 초 손에 아니 수도 간다 치와 말레지 봐도다 먼저 메시지 두저 그냥 잡는 메시지 돌아서 땅 살아서 메시지 돌아서 땅 살아. 근데 나 말하죠. 야, 쌤이 솔직히 가려서 지기 중에 밀러로 watch기 중에 도자 체매 얘기 배 지금 밀러스 교를 따위해서 말하죠. 쌤이나 들리기 수줍이 직신을 한달 수줍이 보야다 시에는 좋아야 되야. 이 너도 그렇지. 한달 아주 미지 망은 제지 당하다. 지금 최 맞지 직세. 제네야 마두가 내바치 다 된제 공부하는 아주 미지다. 도스 미지 켜도 내 남식 치월래하고 치월래서다. 아니 수술다. 저 제매가 인도 아니 수술다. 야고 마치 왜 가다 교바 침불리 시간을 교발내는 아니 왜냐 가서 그래서
And then this problematic belief that one will not die, that I am not dying, animates one's activities all the way throughout their life, pushing them forward and wasting their time, wasting their opportunity. Death, which is apparent, occurs to one, but beyond that and on the way, one reassures oneself, I assist others and I'm not so bad. I watch out for those who are in need and myself engage in nothing very mean. And therefore, along the way, one is mistakenly engaged in their activities. Either they have no thought whatsoever of their imminent death, or their imminent death does occur to them, yet they do not practice in any way consistent with it. And then at the moment of death, when death has indeed arrived, they have no dharmas, no virtuous dharmas for which they can confidently claim responsibility. And then they are filled with remorse. And when at the moment of death, one is remorseful, that is a very perilous moment.
뭐야, 세상 딱 가디스나 마도 동고 치워 템바체. 아니 치워 템바나 신지 치워 템바디야. 아니 거기 템바디 한다 랑이 냠내가 봐 여봐. 냠내디 여봐 그냥 냠내디 배 타고 지어가 고르와. 뭐 냠내디 배 타고 매나. 아니 그 간다를 야. 저 남다는 누구말. 세상 딱 남다 고고요. 저는 그냥 치워 템바마서 템바디야 배. 아니 저도 좋아. 저 남다도 좋아시 고고요. 저 남다도 좋아서 해야 또 그나 하나 되는 또 아직 관도 시간도 시간은 이제 좀 미진한 최유의 상황에 되고 제면이 저와 주요 상황이 아주 용식을 때 하나도 여러다 이 지금 하나는 누구여래 아니 마교라 다도 지기여래 아니 지금 밖에 취소하고 내가 막고 지기여 지기여 상관이야 이내 제바디 저와 침만을 패배 자와지를 또 두개 여바디 that's 저 남다 더 투가지 보고 어디 용하라 다 세디기 낭신 매바 당부파 세디기 디두를 저와 매바 직세 아니 대한 치마 아니 라나다 그다 디두 저와 여바지 어디 보고 여라 이 치마 디두 저와 여바지 소나 아니 지내다 그 취해서 들어왔으니 자기가 해서
Then one contemplates imminent death, but does not merely contemplate imminent death, but recognizes the existence of practices that would allow for a serious spiritual practice and an authentic spiritual practice. One that is not serious and is not authentic is of no use. For there to be merely the idea that there is a spiritual practice and a dharma, but for it never to become authentic and serious, then that means what is the serious and authentic dharma practice? It is to not be seduced by an idea that trivial good one does, and some small virtues one does, and some idea of not being responsible for non-virtues, to avoid the seduction of the idea that I go to the temple and I help out those in need, and in human society, I am some positive contributor. The question is that forceful in such a way that that will actually shape outcomes in successive lives? And in order for outcomes of successive lives to be shaped, there must be no seduction in this life. Seduction by pleasures and displeasures found in this life. And one's view would be to successive lives, with the knowledge that there are experiences, pleasant and unpleasant, to come there. And then with that view, then one's dharma is authentic.
Oh yes, it's not that. Under Permanence, when a Susu is when a Juno Sungjup Chiku Yoba enough. That when I'm on Jibayo, Meg Jibayo, Chubi Jibayo, that Dig Jibayo is a penalty of Peasant and Beck this year, and I'm peasant and patient and saying that would be Jibon. Peasant and Rang Prudus, Mango Pungsha, Rang Tabosun, Pungsha Juna, and Lubagi put them as chush, do you weave, chuchable, do you weave, and chudi that Suzu do you but the Sungyo Majevache. 아니 주요나 용주 때문에 되는 주디 그디 차상 키로로 지가 만하고 키로로 다 수수기 그들 주디 용구여가 예디도 막 시에네 라게 딜어야 주디를 숨겨 채는 그 가족 키로 가족 밖에 주디 키마도 숨겨 채는 좀 두고 이외에는 좀 탑시하고 제외이나 아니 누추 마키바 용거 제가 키와 용거를 차상 마키바 용거로 와서 숨겨 지도로 와 대나신 배대나신 치원내다 뭐 남지마도 용이야가 용이마디다 그때 계산을 그냥 말에 보라 그다음에 자식 체니 나는 좋은 말하겠다 자식 체 협상을 자식 지고야 돼 어디 가서 그냥 내 차비가 돼서
Think of it in this way, that wherever one has accumulated some store of wealth or value, one then protects it and guards it, because there are all sorts of forms that destruction takes, by fire, by flood. Now, what is cited in the scriptural tradition? That one accumulates grains, a store of grains, and that grain may be ruined by moisture and ruined by flood. Therefore, one must protect the grain that one has stored, so that if there is a flood, one doesn't merely observe as spectator as all their store of grains is washed away in a flood. So however much one has stored in grain, then one would preserve the grain store from any flood, so that if there is a flood, as little as possible will be swept away by the flood, or only half, but best of all, none. Now, it is certain that one will die with certainty in one's imminent death, then one must make similar preparations so that one does not experience a massive loss and instead has a prospect of continued advantage.
예, 제가 맛이죠. 지금 치워 말래 공라. 아니 가져 저기 치투고 이어봐야 되는데 라나 팬도 이어. 치워 모두 교류도 아니 수도 망고지. 쟤네 치투고 말을 쟤네 가서 팬도 깔래 가고 이어 해서.
Then, right up until one's death, then, however much as possible, if one practices and prepares accordingly, then in that same degree it will be to one's advantage. But when the moment of death itself comes, there's little more that one can do, and whatever one might do then is not of very much help.
예, 저는 다 그 취지에서 취지에 뒤주 그지 시고 하는 뒤주리 제가 맞아 산이 지기 제일 지적으로 다른 제 뒤주미도 아니게 단단하게 좀 와서 제일 지기 있으면 어디 당지를 했으니 간라이가 당지 되게 다 아주 풍부해요. 맞아. 뒤주 다다 취지 모두에 대한 뭐 당지를 풍부하다. 제가 다디 취지 두에 여바디 가르쳐 것은 치워텐 아니 정말 때네 아니 치외 이미 되게 삼스탄 아니 치외 이미 삼스탄 치워텐백이 배행이 어디 사이 제일 쉬우지 단다 저도 다들 치워 맞으면 이미 되게 아니 내주도 세 텐토는 배편도 친구 여래스
And when dharma would be undertaken, then the time frame for undertaking dharma, and the tendency is to delay until tomorrow with the idea that there's no time today and that it simply won't happen in any short time. But this is all interference by self-grasping that spoils everything and upsets everything. And to prevent inveterate self-grasping, one must recall imminent death. And recalling imminent death, then one will be able to use the time that they have. Now, more next week, time now is passing. And so for now, this characterization of the disadvantage of neglecting to contemplate imminent death and transiency is our topic for now. And if one recalls these and reflects upon these, it is advantageous.
뭐요? 제가 방송 미다바 템바 지워 미다바 템바서 동네 템바서 그래서 아니 시작이 친구 배나 친구도 잘 배나 가지고 되게 많아들 배사 고매하다 배 기름 고매하다 냐면 제시 뭐 제로 친구 제로 된소 만에 삼반남다서 지워 미다바 템베 토네 아니 동네 있는 주 신배 토는 다 고마이나 공원에 기름 차기로 와. 되면은 아니 다 고베일라는 아지 수 뱅아제다 아니 유모 모두 줄래 아니 다 고베이는 고 안들라는 내 니가 쉬우여 와서 제일 잡도 동해고 메다고 고베이는 나는 폐하면 뇌하게 자기 지가 요 말했습니다.
Contemplating death, contemplating transience, contemplating pain and suffering are beneficial, very beneficial, and where we may ordinarily practice generation stage and deity practice, really, if one engages in these practices with comprehension of imminent death and transience and pain and sorrow, and with these full understandings, engages in deity practice, then it may really become generation stage practice. However, if instead one does these things proudly, still mired in mental afflictions, then the deity practices, in fact, are potentially dangerous. And instead of that, then, if one were to contemplate transiency, contemplate imminent death, there is no way in which these are ever anything but constructive.
아주 되게 차진 시대도 이런 말하는 거 주변에 배하게 집지기 기름 지기 좀스다 dos comer 대신 망고시 위에 거와 어디 대신 자고요 이내도 건단 야고 주나 야고 수수 야고 맞으면 거의 이모께 율을 줘야 되는가요 이차들 마음에 손을 막 동행이 기름지 삼다 땅아이나 거를 미중 기야를 팽기를 아니 미중 기야를 때는 다르게 율을 줘야 그다음에 친구차와 제가 미중 예외 동행 기름체 요래 아니 이다 동행 기름 어디서 검토 보이나 아니 다 고미야 요래 없나 편의 친구 요래
It happens often enough that practices of tutelary deities, yidam, and generation stage practices and completion stage practices are given considerable emphasis. And this is well and good if these practices are undertaken correctly. But when they are not, they themselves become cause for proliferation of mental afflictions. Now, however, if one contemplates the pain in hell realms, the contemplation of the pain in hell realms gives rise to renunciation. Renunciation is cause for liberation. It is the great seed, cause for liberation. Therefore, when one contemplates the pain of hell realms, the pain of Preta realms, and renunciation is generated, this is the beginning of the generation stages. And for the potential in generation stage practices and the rest, the development of renunciation contributes significantly. Now, that's about it in terms of time. And any questions that you have on your mind, prepare them and we can open up for a Q&A. Excuse me.
Yeah,
If you have a question, please shoot. And if not, then we'll meditate.
One question on what is considered an accepted succession?
딱히 걔와 심하게는
음.
아니 책 하나씩 열어.
제가 치마 나도 그제 나왔어. 제가 치마 켈레 두야라. 맞아 그리고 가르당에서 제가 치마 두지 그리고 가도 열이네. 제가 치마 말도 건. 제가 너무도 또 그래서.
The accepted succession is a succession in a series of lives, and in order to establish that there is a successive life following the present one, it must be conclusively determined that there was a life which preceded the present.
거의 제가 너무도 당고 여봐지. 그런 게 예봐게나. 아니 제가 치마 두배 그 투그래. 아니 남산 두고 내라고 두고 해서.
Persuaded of a previous life preceding the present, then the acknowledgement of a life succeeding the present one is made easy.
제가 너무 두지 가래 두어서는 제만 타버리고 봐서 아메리칸 깨마 타버리 제발 줘봐. 제발이 아니 리버티 주제스. 아니 랑 리버가 뭐도 손데 리버 이베이셔스. 다들 그걸 해서
The youngest,
제발 깨마 타버리 봐서
came out
제발 깨마다 안 많이 깨마다 제발 깨마다 오더라. 그 리버 주제 리버가 뭐 유명한 예배인데 아니 리버 이베이셔스. 온다 부지 다 데려서 리버 주제 이건 받았어.
The demonstration of the preceding existence follows these lines. The subject is the conscious awareness at the moment of conception. It follows that it had its own precursor for the reason that it is conscious awareness.
이제 안다가 그 되게 리버가 단행이 리버가 아마도 균이 받 아버지 쪽으로 와. 이 균이 받은 예서나 리버가 아마지 이거 티고 균이 받은 얘기로 와. 이 균이나 다들 리버가 아주 뭐가 균이 받지. 둘투를 해서
Where the continuity of conscious awareness is established and involves the observation that the present continuity of consciousness follows from preceding moments necessarily. Then, with this, one is able to infer that the continuity at present becomes the continuity in the future.
뭐이 배는 고대우스는 드링기 다 맞아요. 이 계산 수용 계산 나디기 균이 봐. 계산 나디를 해봐서 드링기 나디 수용 수용하세. 다 드링기 나디 산이 파두고 해봐시. 아무것도 뒤질잖아. 배들리잖아. 아니 이제 바로 를 땅으로
Now, to put it quite simply, then, just as today each ourselves is easily able to recognize that they are of a part and continuity of themselves yesterday, and they are today in a continuation of and from yesterday, and that tomorrow too there will be a continuity of themselves. This is the notion in a short time span. In large, the span of time.
제가 지금 이제 좀 하다고 한달 단행이 리버디 하나님 나는 셈다. 하나 둘라 예배겠다. 셈 가장 제시 잡이다. 저는 셈다 류니요라. 저는 셈다 류니부디 나를 유출해봐. 다들 유인지 마음을 두고 이어봐. 이게 됐어. 뭐 차고래서. 뭐 참을 해서.
The present state of conscious awareness, when we have spoken of the aggregate of mental consciousness, of mind, and of the physical body, and when there is, too, the idea of a continuity in the aggregates, this requires some subtlety. One will not necessarily immediately be convinced by such a demonstration. The conviction will only follow from repeated exposure and consideration of the demonstration. And especially on an analysis of the continuity that is of conscious awareness. Are there others?
You said that we need to contemplate on the hell realms and the spiritual realms, and I've listened to you talk about and describe them, and it's pretty graphic and it's pretty visceral, but to contemplate on that feels like a lot. And I'm wondering if there's like a lesser practice, or how can it be, like, why should we contemplate on hell when sometimes it feels like hell here?
Da 이시들이 낸된 택택신이 아니 녀의 동화디 상목당그래 아니 이다게 아니 동화 용수디양 아니 상목당그레스 아니 양나양의 송도 아니 된서 동화 대다 배 직스롱와다 아니 남자 계야다 딱 할래게 동화 아니 용수디요레 아니 this mandrayana, this mandrayana, and similar this, and chok couple, and yendo couple too, and 가르치는 인직 the 동화 대다, and some 당거래 가인세나, and 미기 그래서 미기 치초라양, and 녀에게 내스, and 라본 뭐요?
이 아무것도 그게 사무타인 고추버도 차가래스. 다 균진 가래스 나서 단다. 두구치 맨날 뚝투야. 동해지 나도 쇠투고 맨나스. 아니 동해 친구들이 가르치는 수용이 매했습니다. 저것들 해서
Now your thoughts here indicate that you are well begun now, And now the reason, okay, is this. The reason is just this. Pain here that we see is but to brush the tip of our finger beside a hot flame. And when burning the tip of our finger on a flame itself is unbearable to us, what are we to make of pain so much greater than that?
그냥 담가 유나 그냥 조금 매ல 또 책임에 수부 간사 매ල 자기 임에 담가 째서는 그냥 그렇게 미 마시지.
Here you have a choice. Would you prefer to graze a flame with the tip of your finger or to plunge your entire finger into the fire?
그거는 이래서 그 간사 동의 레디 제부디 제만 동의 친구디 용 먹어야 동의 되지 요거 뭐 좋지 뭐 처는 수수 동의들 예반이 제용 먹어 주나 아니 계산하러 왔어 동의들 용거는 딱 배사고 지지 단단한 좀 미때나 지금 이만치 마대와 예나야 맞어 사람 나기가 빠져 아니 수고를 나서 가서 들어와 거기 영성은 계산 아니 그래서 라와 요 말에 아니 백강이 친구가 세상하고 안다 랑이 대도 대화 유백이 아니 다 대시질 해서
And pain experienced is the result of karmas. And when pain such as this may be experienced, then we would avoid ever needing to experience such pain. Here, the purpose is to indicate, to observe there is such pain, so that we become familiar with pain of such extent, so that we can be sure that we prevent the experience of such pain, which is certainly an advantage for us, isn't it? When for us, one day of discomfort and physical pain is what it is, so unpleasant, then we observe too that elsewhere in hell realms, there is no freedom whatsoever to change outcomes, and furthermore, the pain is extreme and continuous. Now, the purpose of this is to work with our own experiences of pain and pleasure.
아니 맞아 주디 저기 끼기로 와서는 저기 동의 끼기로 와서 동의디 세고요 님마세는 동의디 용고요 저다 맞아 동의디 당고 뭘 때는 동의디 아 마냥 탑시 치고요 이거 수습이 내게로 와서
Then it would be something like this. Let's say something in this way, that now each of us, if any one of us has already latent in our minds the karmas which have as their consequence the experience of pain processed in hell realms, that means that with such a karma latent in our own minds, the consequence is bound to arise, namely great pain in the hell realms. Should it be the case, then we would remove such karmas and mental afflictions so that we are not obligated to experience any such pain.
가르치는 배나 아주 미개 줄을 미개 줄이라냐 되자 온 미개 주체가요 공주 미개 주체요 이모 미개 주체요 제가 먼저 레디가 세가 살마서 아주 수수줄이야 잠깐 잠깐요 미주 열어서
The karmas for which we are responsible are not finite. They cannot be discretely enumerated, such that I am responsible for this much and not responsible for any of that. Instead, as there are 10 paths of non-virtuous action that may be motivated by lust, by hatred, by ignorance, each of these poisons motivating 10 paths of non-virtuous action, there is no finite measure of all the karmas that we are responsible for. However, should you be in fact Jetsun Roma, the Lady Tara herself, having purified all karmas, then my observations here bear no connection to your situation. If that isn't the case, and if what is the case is there are karma klesha latent and dormant in our minds, then these will precipitate again and again births in samsara with all the pain that this entails, and we would avert that outcome, and we would observe the kinds of pain there are in order to avert such outcomes. A person broadcasting seeds will have a massive container filled with seeds, filled with enough seeds to cast and seed an entire field. Now our minds have seeds for broadcasting for a great deal of time to come. We are as a farmer who has a massive bag of massive seeds to distribute. Unless we remove those seeds from our minds, then they will ripen. Now, unless in some way we remove the seeds, whether we incinerate them or we cause them to rot away, in one way or another, unless we address and treat the dormant seeds in our mind, then as they are dormant seeds with their inevitable consequences, the consequences will be pain. Other questions? If there are no questions, then we can conclude here. There is, in view of pain and sorrow, sympathetic identification with the pain and sorrow of others, such that we take as object of meditation the pain experienced by others, not as spectators of another's pain, but by identifying with the individual in their pain, imagining what would it be for me to be in such a position to experience such pain. This is the sympathetic identification with the experience of pain of others. And then two, there's meditation with the view that pain is undesirable, a meditation on the undesirability of pain, as well as contemplation that gives rise to compassion for beings who experience the pain of hells, and love for beings experiencing the pain of hell realms. There are a whole host of contemplations and meditations on pain and sorrow.
예, 당고들은 이게 공원 마시는 두개 고민신 게 많았지, 이제. 이거들은 먼저 뒤 넓다기 넓생 제바다. 아니 먼저 보게 지도 내자 시바다. 최 시바 생일이 먼저 니주백 보름도 동거 친구 이렇게 개발 친구 요래서
Without a familiarity with pain and sorrow, one cannot meditate on pain and sorrow in these ways. And then there's also relevant to this a very big divide, great divide between the kind of study that goes on in universities and the sorts of information that is relevant in society and institutions in society, and the objectives of Dharma and objects of knowledge in Dharma.
최실이더만 교육차 많은 시요. 굉장히 잘 용시. 제단다 교육차스를 동행이 곧 시기로 와. 지금 이라 최실이더만 아니 미리 셈나기. 그게 저유백이 아니 미주기기 많아 랑신이 내요. 내가 지도나 그게 시에도 되고 이게 가져 나와 가져 두고도 가리 시에 캐버치고도 아니 미기 왜 가리 년사를 섬당 레시하고 추니도 이제 섬당 말에 그 셈나가 많이 봐도 패마 가르도 섬당 디마도 그 간다 니주 딜에 시에도 셈나 대화유 셈나 패마유 어디 시에 탑시시고 제가 그게 추니의 신이기 전에 캐버치고 요래서
In Dharma, there is great emphasis upon what is perilous and less emphasis on what might otherwise be thought desirable. So the very great emphasis on pain and sorrow in Dharma. That's the first point. And secondly, the emphasis in Dharma is upon the mind of any given person and what is relevant to the mind of the person. This naturally is the emphasis of Dharma. And this is all very different from our tendency in ordinary learning to investigate a lecturer to see how sophisticated are they, how eloquent are they. That is a matter of no importance to us. What is important to us is what are the advantages to a conscious person. This is the natural emphasis and direction Dharma takes.
원래 저는 최신이다 최신이 최파시 야부시기 유버도다 년식이 유버 새로 가르나 그 최신이 수수 교육이 라부여봐 라나 교육이 랑이 교육이다 저와 대시 제기 유버 오 된대기 소화를 좀 받고 최년식이 돈이네 최대스 다 고야 주술래 받아 신이 이번에 내다 최신 대시기 유버 오 된대기 두중어도 최신이 좀 대시 교당도 된대 요래서
Therefore, the measure of relevance in Dharma, of whatever the topic has a connection been made between the experience of an individual and the perils that they face? Is a listener able to connect their experience to the topic? And if they are, then some measure of comprehension will emerge. And from the standpoint of the lecturer too, where it does, this is some expression of their understanding of Dharma. Now the time to wrap up has come, and we will recite our closing prayers, and meditation will have to wait until later. Page 12. Dema sunbe tsera kundu yang jambe yangi tsewe jezone Tembe rimba kuzan lamki jo Nene dobe yena neje jo Rangi jishin dobe lamki ne Shurta tsewe jambe dabge ye Rowe yike mumba seje ne Gyawe temba yurin zingyo geje Tembo rinje choge magyaba Jalyan yambara gyube chode Nije chembe yirab kyamba ye Pete teje sawara chemba cho Seje gyawe mecho chende le Ledro chanchu lamge lebe yang Tade namge yila bede ye Gyawe zeba rindu gyamgyo je Lamzan rube tugen ruje je Kege seje nidam bime Sera kundu gyawe mabari Namda landan jawa magyur je Kanze tiba chola chuchu je, sujin rula tumba de yitse. Tude namge tatu roche je, kashi gyatso chukun gyaguru ji. From my two collections, vast in space that I've amassed, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eyes blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, Manju Shri. May I find the best of the paths of the complete teaching, and may I please all the Buddhas by practicing. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings. With the points of the path, as I have discerned them, may I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I offer this treasure of happiness to aid all sentient beings. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounty of peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by following the complete graduated path to enlightenment and the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings eliminate adversity and make things conducive for practicing the excellent path, never be parted from any of their lives, from the purest path raised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Jinye sabe yewa tenda roa kampenda kevara jetso lozon rabari tembe nipo rindu seji Kare rawe gurve chingande pendande o malu jombe Chere ziwan tenzen yasa ye shabe sidi badu tenju je Jambe bawo jidara jemba dam kundu zambo de yan de shin Deda gunge jesu dalo je gewa deda tamje randu Dudro jebe gewa tamje ye mawa kala shodu mawa Đại Địa Giê Tao Tao Đi Con Giang Song Hồ Chư Chê Ra Đô Ma Hoa Rì Yê Chẳng Chô Sen Chô Rê Bồ Chê Ma Chê Ba Na Yê Yê Bì Chê Yê Ba Nhã Ba Mê Ba Nhã Gong Nê Gong Đô Bê Hoa. And dedicate whatever virtues I have ever collected for the benefit of the teachings of a sentient being, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. In the land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful sinners and tensing counsel, please remain until cyclic existence is ended. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, also I dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by the victorious thus gone ones of the three times, so that I might perform the noble bodhisattva deeds. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Thank you all very much.